This is Andy, he's the pastor of Manvers Street Baptist Church.
And this is Stephen, he's part of the team at Bath Abbey.
Welcome. Andy, you had the idea for this roundup of what the church is doing. I mean, what was your thinking behind it?
I just thought it would be good during this time to have an opportunity to explore what God was doing in the churches, in the community, in the kind of grassroots areas that we might not be hearing about because we're not able to meet together.
Fantastic. And we had loads of people respond, didn't we, to our invitation to put material in. So we got 6 or 7 features. Our first feature, we're looking at what's just a few of the things that the church around the city has been doing for schools, families and children. Great. Welcome, Philip.
Thank you very much.
Tell us what you've been doing with the school next door.
Well, our church school, St Stephen's, is just over the 6-foot fence. Our garden joins onto the playground. And when it all started, we had 48 hours before lockdown and everybody was wondering what was going on. And there were going to be, 20 or so children of key workers in. I was due to do an assembly that day anyway. And so I just thought I'd sound them out. I sent them an email to say, do you want me to do it in the playground? So all the children came out into the playground. I went up a ladder and we did the story of Noah up a ladder, and all the children were sitting on chairs, nicely socially distanced.
Yeah.
And I suppose originally it was to give them some kind of continuity. I mean, they're all ages from 4 up to 11. And a lot of them were very worried about what was happening, and I think it was just to say, look, things are different, but we can still have collective worship. We can still do the poems and the songs and the stories that I do anyway.
Oh, no! Come along, slimy pants. Open the door, and in you go. His Majesty the King.
May he live forever.
I have a final.
It's been great getting back to it, and having done Scruffy for 3 years or so, 3 or 4 years, I've got quite a lot of material that I can use.
Brilliant. Welcome to Scruffy Church TV. Great to see you. Welcome here to Bath for Scruffy Church TV. So we'll start with a prayer to give all of our time to God and ask God to bless us and our time together. Done. Let's sing. Sometime on a Sunday, I know where I'll be, watching my computer to see Scruffy TV. It's Scruffy Church. Woo! Scruffy Church.
So what do you think is the appeal of Scruffy Church?
Well, I think when I was working at the BBC, we in children's, we used to say that the television in the corner of the room can be something that shouts out at you, and you can just sit there and watch. Or, being the BBC, which is far more sort of education as well as entertainment, it was about drawing people in. And I think with, some of the times I'll do a story with puppets or a story just acted out. And other times we'll do it with little things, little people down on a table or little bits of it. So people are drawn in. And I think what seems to be what people like is the fact that we can be really big and bright and loud and fun and join in. And the next moment we're quiet and drawn in together.
We've also been able to bless schools, children who are still going to school because maybe their parents are frontline professionals or maybe they're vulnerable, gifting them with toys, games, books, craft stuff that just is a treat for them and lets them know that they're loved, lets them know that, again, people are thinking about them, people are praying for them, and giving them something exciting to look forward to and enjoy. One thing we do as a church generally is to hold thank you banquets where we bless the socks off frontline professionals, police officers, social workers, lawyers, doctors, nurses, teachers, and we have people in our congregation, including the youth who served them last time, just putting them on a delicious evening where they get properly spoilt. And we're really looking forward to holding another thank you banquet when all this is over and we can meet together again to thank those frontline professionals who've worked super hard during this period of time. There's a website called Trauma Informed Churches, which was set up by our pastor, Betsy, who is also a qualified psychotherapist. And that aims to equip churches and enable traumatised children to feel safe and be understood in churches. And obviously, during this time, there is a much greater need for that, because there is more trauma that is just happening due to obviously the current situation. So there are extra resources put on, especially for this time. There are also kids' resources and activity sheets that you can, as a church, download and use and share with your kids.
I mean, are you homeschooling? I know
Yeah.
Leo's only 4.
Yeah, so we're probably at the easier end of homeschooling in terms of the workload. We're just trying to take it a day at a time, trying to be gentle with ourselves, trying to take our lead really from him. But it's going fine.
Must be tough though for families with particularly more than one child.
Yeah, I mean,
this time.
We've got just one, so that can be difficult enough at times. But certainly for families who have more than one, and particularly if they're secondary and primary and mixed up, it's really tough. Yeah.
Okay, fab. Our next feature is to do with volunteering. I mean, the church runs on volunteers, doesn't it? I mean, we have hundreds of volunteers at the Abbey. Yeah. So this little feature, this little segment is we're just hearing from about compassionate communities and from Oasis Church, just about how the church's army of volunteers is helping during this time.
It's interesting. Beginning of last year, I think it was, or halfway through, there was a new initiative called Compassionate Communities, and it's sort of gaining momentum. So, Rowan, what's that actually about?
So Compassionate Communities is a movement and ensures that communities are coming together and ensuring that everybody has access to the services that they need, and that people are really looking out for one another in their community. So it could be something like going shopping for your neighbour, or it could be making sure the local hairdresser can signpost to services if they're worried about somebody. So it's just making sure that every contact counts with somebody who is vulnerable, and every community is working to be as compassionate as possible, and really does focus on being a movement within Bath and North East Somerset. And that's not been difficult to achieve during the COVID crisis. We have many more volunteers than we need at the moment. So Baines has particularly responded well to the development of a compassionate community movement.
Had to just sort of suddenly scale up everything that 3SG does in a really short space of time, just to try and mobilize and harness this sort of desire to do something and do something positive.
Well,
and the really original thing about what we're doing in Bath and North East Somerset is that it's just more than food. So that we've got 9 pods that are available to people as part of the hub and the compassionate community movement. And whereas a lot of that kind of grew out of food and the need for food provision, it's so much more than that around things like housing advice and preventing homelessness, debt advice. And there is a whole team of people who are able to signpost to services and make sure everybody gets as much early intervention as possible. But the initial phone call might be about food.
In what ways do you think churches and the faith community can actually help support this initiative and this work?
I mean, I think we would ask people to be really mindful of what's going on in their own communities and where they live, and to pick up the phone if they're concerned about a neighbour, just to keep an eye out for maybe somebody who was exercising daily and now is not, for example, or an elderly neighbour who's got underlying health conditions. Just checking in on each other as we're coming out of the crisis and still needing to stay alert, and just really make sure that support that they may have already been giving, certainly, but make sure that continues, because we still are in the midst of a crisis. So we need to make sure that we're looking after our most vulnerable.
Great. And James, what do you think?
Yeah, and I think what's really amazing about this is that of the volunteers that are going out and helping people, around about 90% of them are actually carrying on and continuing to support those people themselves, which is a real testament to what Compassionate Communities is all about, is about building a movement and about people just helping those in their immediate environment. So, that to me is the real success of what's happened over the last 2 months.
So at Oasis we already run something called Make Lunch, which is a holiday hunger project. So for those that are eligible for free school meals, the holidays are quite tricky because they're not receiving that support, and so Make Lunch is designed to sort of bridge that gap. So we run sessions where we provide hot, nutritious meals to children and their families alongside games and activities. And obviously when the pandemic hit, we knew that we weren't going to be able to run Make Lunch as we normally do. So we spent a bit of time just praying, thinking, how can we respond? What do we do instead? And the result of that has been the food parcel project. So we've been working in partnership with the Salvation Army and Fair Share, who are a great charity that help redistribute surplus food to lots of different organisations. And basically we've now been able to deliver up to 50 food parcels to families that are in need every week, and we're going to do that in May, June and July. So it's been a very sharp learning curve. It's been something we've had to set up very quickly, but it's working really well. So every week our volunteers arrive sort of lunchtime, receive the delivery from Fair Share, pack it all away in the fridges, and then a bit later on more volunteers arrive to pack the bags that then go out to families. And as the Salvation Army's got a car park, our volunteer drivers sort of drive into the car park, and then volunteers come out and place the bags directly in cars just to maintain social distancing and protect both volunteers and recipients of the food parcels. So then we're out all over Bath in lots of different locations delivering that food parcel, which contains not only food but a game or activity and a letter just telling them a bit about us and where they can go if they need any more help. So as I said, we hope to deliver that over the summer, and then in September we're launching a food pantry. So it's going to be a great way for some of these families to go on receiving support, and that will be again working with Fair Share. People pay a really small fee of sort of £2-3 a week, and they receive 10 items from the pantry. So it's a great way again of just getting good quality, nutritious food to people for sort of a fraction of the price. So it's been great to be able to bless the city in this way, great to be able to work with other churches and organisations to help that happen, as we've had volunteers that have helped us from all across the city, and we look forward to opening the pantry in September as well.
Andy, that was so good to hear about compassionate communities. I have to confess, I was in on a couple of the early meetings about compassionate communities in the city, this being a compassionate city, like being a fair trade city. And I must admit, a big part of me was thinking, will this ever get any traction? So the way that COVID-19 has made compassionate communities happen is brilliant.
Fantastic.
And Oasis volunteers, fantastic. I've seen a lot of good neighbourliness through this lockdown. And Andy and I we're neighbours.
Yep.
We've got a WhatsApp group in our street.
Yep.
I mean, what's been good for you about that?
I think that the two things that really stand out for me, one is like neighbourhoods around the country where we're gathering together on a Thursday at 8 o'clock to clap for carers in the NHS. I mean, I think between that and the hand washing, I think my hands have taken a real pounding during lockdown. But that, and I think also just the positive way that people across faiths have interacted during this time, but also that I've discovered people who have faith that I didn't even know had faith within the neighbourhood, really been able to share with them as well. So that's been great.
Yeah, we've had two deaths of members of family in our street, haven't we? And I think the way people have rallied, neighbours have rallied together around funerals. So on the day of the funeral, we've come out onto our doorsteps and paid our respects. There's been collection for flowers for the family in the street, and that's been fantastic. And it was really moving when one of my neighbours' husband died, and that evening we all put candles in the window, and really to look out of our window and see neighbours expressing their support in that way. I really hope this continues. Fantastic. So neighbourhoods, families, housing. I mean, you coming on to Julian House, which is our next feature. You've done a lot of work with Julian House, based at Manvers Street. Tell us about.
Well, there's certainly challenges there for people who are homeless, for the street community, given very little time in that sense when all of this kicked off to house people who were sleeping rough. And the staff down at Julian House, I work with them on a regular basis, do a fantastic job, and have continued to do a fantastic job in these really challenging situations, working with some of the most vulnerable and complex people within our city.
Yeah, thank you.
So hotels were probably the quickest way to house people, and hoteliers in Baines responded really well to our requests and our appeal for help. But we took a strategic decision to do something that has the potential to be more sustainable, and make sure that the people that we are supporting felt like they were coming into a home. And that had the biggest chance then of success. So we have seen in other areas people being evicted from hotels and it being a really challenging picture, because it's not a place that people are used to living in. So we took a bit more time than we were being granted by the government, but we then housed over 40 rough sleepers. So they've gone into accommodation locally that was set up, or they've been reconnected to their hometown. And working with Baines Council, we identified 29 units of accommodation, which we set up in really quick time. And we worked with Curo to set up another 5 accommodation units for some of our hardest to engage, our most complex rough sleepers who've previously been turned down for accommodation. So, you know, it's been a real positive for lots of our clients, because actually the end result of COVID has been accommodation. But So we've continued to provide food. We've got Manvers Street Hostel in the centre of town, and we've continued to provide food to all the 20 residents who are either staying at Manvers Street Hostel or staying at another provision. We're also delivering more than 50 meals a day, so that everybody has got at least one cooked meal per day across our accommodation. So that includes some of our other existing hostels as well. And we're continuing to provide out of the back of Manvers Street Hostel, with really appropriate social distancing measures, food every single day in the afternoon. So people are able to access food through Julian House.
It's so good to hear the continuing good work that Julian House and other partner organisations are doing in the city. In this next, the first part of this next feature, we're going to hear from a good friend of mine, Kenny, who is the pastor of the Elim Church just up on Queen's Square. Some personal reflections from him at a really turbulent time, I guess, for him personally and for his family, with a housing situation. You'll hear more about that.
In the second half of the feature, we're going to hear from Father John. Father is the priest at St John's Roman Catholic Church, and really about how his church is being sustained. How his people just keep going through this difficult time of lockdown. Enjoy.
A word that is overused at the moment, I think, but is still equally valid, is the word reset. And God has been moving me to a position of reset. At the very start of lockdown, we moved house, which is not to be recommended. We moved, just my wife and I and our 2 young boys, and we moved from one side of the city to the other side of the city. But since that move, we have become very, very used to these 4 walls. And the office that I am now in is also my church. It's also where I do all my administration, where I do all my contact, where I do all my meetings, all happen virtually within this space. And that has caused this reset to happen. It's caused the things that I perhaps considered important to be perhaps shaken up a little bit. I need to represent Jesus well to my family. I need to represent Jesus really well to my new neighbours. I need to represent Jesus really well to my church, to those who I come into contact with and who come into contact with me. I need to represent Jesus really, really well. And that's a challenge. It's not an insurmountable challenge, because I believe that there are great opportunities in this time that are afforded to us and afforded to the church. And I, for one, want to be part of that. But it is equally a challenge to navigate what that looks like. And I'm allowing God to press that hard reset. It's taken me a while, but I'm allowing him to press that hard reset on my life. And I want to see where God wants to take me.
And taking part, I still celebrate Mass in the same way as I would. I still make the responses in the hope that those who are taking part digitally from their own homes are responding in the way that they normally would. It seems strange saying the Lord be with you and then saying nothing.
Yes.
But I'm hoping that they're saying, and with your spirit from the others. I can't quite hear them at the back.
Do you think you've engaged with new people that you wouldn't have otherwise engaged with through the digital world?
I don't worry about numbers. I don't play numbers games. I know that on average during the week with Mass, there's probably about 50, 60 people every day in church at Mass. My lovely IT technicians who are kind of behind, they're a great support. I couldn't do this without them. And they make sure I can switch on the camera, I can switch on the microphones, I can make sure it's all up and running from my side. They're the ones that upload it and make sure it goes through to where it needs to go. They tell me that me normally having 50 or 60 at a weekday, they tell me there's probably about 300-400 unique views. That's unique views. That's not how many people are sat behind the computer tapping in. And they're not just from Bath. We've got people from a broader area, but there's somebody from Madagascar, Tonga, New Zealand, the west coast of Canada, parts of America, Brazil, parts of Africa, and other parts over Europe. So we're kind of, I'm not sort of gloating, but it is very much a very broad community at the moment, which is encouraging. I suppose my understanding of the Eucharist is it's the source of everything, and it's the summit of everything. I celebrate Mass every day with a community around me, because that is, and again, part of a Catholic understanding of the Eucharist. It's both the food and the fuel and the sustenance and the encouragement and the support that I need to do everything that I'm called to be as a disciple of Jesus. If I want to be like Jesus, and if I want to be Christ-like in the way that I think and I speak and I act, then the Eucharist is an opportunity for me to come close to Christ, to know his love and his mercy and his forgiveness and his compassion, so that through the day I can be that. Because I suppose the old adage that you are what you eat, then I think that is so true, theologically true, about the Eucharist. I receive Christ in order to become like Christ.
I mean, I hope that you found that as moving as I did when I first saw it. And we were talking just before we started filming about how moving it is to see people across denominations coming and sharing together in that most intimate kind of way.
Really good, really good. I certainly hadn't, hence my question to Father John, I certainly hadn't appreciated how formational that daily, taking the Eucharist on a daily basis is for our Catholic brothers and sisters. Our next feature is takes us up to the university and to the hospital. I interviewed through Zoom Phil and Nigel and Karen, asking them what it was like to be a chaplain at the hospital and the universities through this time of lockdown. Enjoy.
I think the staff have a huge sense of gratitude. You know, the way the nation has really put the NHS, in the centre of things. With that, I guess, gratitude, there's also a sense of awkwardness, because NHS is staffed by caring people, and they're not used to being centre stage. They're used to putting other people in the centre stage, and now they're centre stage. There's perhaps a little bit of sorrow at the moment. What I mean is that some of the colleagues that I'm talking to are realizing that patients that are presenting themselves to the hospital are presenting themselves with symptoms that are further on than what my colleagues would normally experience. So in other words, people are so protective of the NHS that they've waited and waited until they've been desperate to come in. My experience is that there is a greater warmth, because I'm a human being not in a medical uniform that's showing that is coming to visit them, and regardless of whether they have faith or they don't have faith, there's a general warmth to us being on the ward. And people are willing to talk about spiritual things. There was one guy I visited last week, and he said, "Oh, that would have taken me 6 pints in order to have got into that conversation ordinarily." But with you, we're talking about things quite quickly, and I guess hospital does that.
So I'm still in touch with the ones that I knew before the lockdown. So I'm still meeting students for virtual coffee, well, real coffee, but virtually. And also some groups are still happening online, and sometimes a prayer happening online. So in some ways, not much has changed. It's just the physicality has changed.
Yes. Do you find that difficult? Not having the physical presence?
I think what I find difficult is missing on those chance encounters where I would, get into conversation with someone on the bus, or that I met on campus, or someone who passed through the chaplaincy. Those chance encounters are very few and far between now, I guess.
Yeah. There's something about sharing vulnerability. I had one student who came to see me quite early on, and he was very anxious about things and felt almost ashamed. Was his faith failing, that he should feel so anxious without a failure of his faith? And I talked with him and said, look, I am very anxious, and it's okay to be anxious. It's okay to be fearful, because we are going through a huge time. And there's something about standing with people, helping each other through this. For me, this is really important. One of the saddest things I heard in the early days was a palliative care consultant talking about her sadness and seeing people having to die alone, and they couldn't have their loved ones with them. And we've had sometimes university, we had a bereavement recently in university amongst the staff, where we actually called the team members in from furlough to have a socially distanced but meeting together to enable people to shed a tear together and talk about sadness together. It just showed how crucially important it is for us to learn new ways of saying earlier, non-touch ways, but new ways of being able to stand alongside others together, sharing emotion and sharing hurt.
Yeah. Isn't that really good to hear about the work of chaplaincy?
Fantastic.
I mean, chaplains are often the unsung heroes in the work of the gospel, aren't they? It's that ministry of presence, that ministry of being in a place and just being available to people. When we're nearing the close of this roundup, Andy, so thank you for the idea, Andy, and it's good to be neighbours and to be able to pull it off together. And thank you for all those of you who've provided material for this roundup. There is so much more we could have said, and there's a fantastic amount of good work going on in the church and the city, but also not just in the church, around the city, in the spaces between the churches. So let's keep sharing those stories, encouraging each other as we go through lockdown, and hopefully before too long out of lockdown.
We're going to close by inviting you to join us in sharing together the family prayer, the prayer Jesus taught his disciples to pray.
Thank you.
Let us pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name.
Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven.
Give us this day our daily bread.
Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us.
Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil.
For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, for ever and ever. Amen.
Amen.